Cleveland, Progress and Prosperity. No other Clevelander embodied these two words more than did Tom L. Johnson, Mayor of Cleveland from 1901 to 1909.
Tom Johnson was, I think, one of the greatest statesmen America has produced.
It was ever his aim to lighten the burden of the poor.
Early in his career, Johnson seized advantage and privilege wherever he could, and soon came to control a powerful streetcar empire that stretched across the Midwest. However, after being inspired by the principles of progressivism, Johnson's eyes were opened to the plight of the common man and the evils of what he himself had propagated as a monopolist. A changed person, Johnson abandoned his entrepreneurial path and went into politics. As mayor of Cleveland, he reformed services and utilities to improve the livelihood of the average citizen.
By the turn of the 20th century, America's urbanization had created many clear problems for the working class. One major concern was the neglect and economic exploitation of immigrants and industrial laborers by business interests and corrupt political machines. Cities provided waste management only when their funds were plentiful, leading to poor sanitation and rampant disease. Utilities, such as electric power plants, were provided by private corporations whose goal was to maximize profit rather than serve the public good. Public transportation was built on a brutal, price-gouging system solely for the benefit of greedy monopolists. In response to this crisis, a wave of compassionate politicians began the struggle to curb the excesses of the corporations and aid the downtrodden lower classes through government reform. This battle became known as the Progressive Movement, and at the forefront of this call to arms stood Tom Johnson. Johnson was a successful businessman who had been inspired to change his ways by Henry George, a brilliant progressive theorist and a close friend. Johnson won the Cleveland mayoral election of 1900 and took charge decisively, signing bills and dealing with unruly contractors on the first day of his term. Johnson's background as a streetcar magnate gave him an understanding of both the abuses and desires of big business. This insight, combined with Johnson's drive and ability, allowed him to pinpoint and fix Cleveland's myriad problems. As Lincoln Steffens, a famous muckraking journalist, noted,
"Honesty is not enough. It takes intelligence, some knowledge or theory of economics, courage, strength, willpower, humor, leadership. It takes intellectual integrity to solve our political problems. And these Tom Johnson had above all the politicians of my day."
Johnson's most important reform was to put privately owned companies and utilities under municipal ownership. He refused to renew the charters of harmful companies, dismantling their strangleholds on public services and transportation. Notable corporations affected were the Newburgh Reduction Company, that dealt with the city's garbage, the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company, that provided lighting for the city, and Cleveland Electric, which controlled nearly all of the city's streetcar lines.
I believe in municipal ownership of these monopolies because if you do not own them, they will in time own you. They will rule your politics, corrupt your institutions, and finally, destroy your liberties.
Cities were filthy back then. People would throw their garbage right out the window into the street and nobody would pick it up. Cleveland became the first city to pick up its own garbage.
Cleveland, like most American cities at the time, was a cesspool of filth. Streets were coated in garbage, slop, mud, and dung. In 1905, Johnson's plan for municipal garbage collection was instituted when the city purchased the Newburgh Reduction Company. Within 2 years, at the beginning of Johnson's third term as mayor, Cleveland boasted one of the most efficient refuse collection systems in the country. Municipal garbage collection made Cleveland cleaner and safer, as it helped eradicate dangerous diseases such as tuberculosis. After his initial success in the field of waste management, Johnson attempted to take on the constrictive streetlight monopoly in Cleveland. He initially proposed to acquire the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company, CEI, and submitted cost projections to the city council. In a stinging blow to Johnson, the legislation was not passed. Corrupt city council members, swayed by CEI, denied Johnson a referendum to have the public vote on the issue. In response, Johnson underwrote the purchase of a South Brooklyn plant, which immediately created intense competition, cutting rates in half and dismantling CEI's monopoly. For the first time, citizens had control of their own utilities. The primary form of transportation for the working class in Cleveland consisted of streetcars. When Tom Johnson became mayor in 1901, he demanded fare be reduced from 5 cents to 3 cents.
You have to remember, if you made $10 a week back then, that was good money. That was $500 a year, you were doing well. So 3 cents meant a lot back then.
Johnson received stiff opposition from the private owners of the streetcar industry, which was funded by the Republican Party boss, Ohio Senator Marcus Hanna, an ardent opponent of the progressive movement. However, Johnson's business past, full of conflict with other powerful corporations, had steeled him for the fight to come. After a protracted court battle, Johnson compromised with the streetcar companies. It was agreed that they would aim for a 3-cent fare, but under no circumstance was a company to have a fare greater than 5 cents. Johnson hoped that the 3-cent fare would lead to municipal control of Cleveland Electric, the dominant streetcar monopoly in Cleveland. Then the means of transportation would be controlled by those who relied on them every day to get to and from work. This conflict, dubbed the Railway War, was the most grievous battle Tom Johnson ever fought.
It rained injunctions for a time. Every foot of ground that the railway company tried to cover was contested in the courts.
The struggle resulted in Cleveland Electric losing most of its autonomy to a municipal committee. Johnson's reforms had a lasting effect on the city's streetcar system. Control of Cleveland Electric and Johnson's 3-cent plan allowed Cleveland to offer better streetcar service at lower prices than in any other city in the nation. Unfortunately, the fight for municipal ownership cost Johnson his fortune, his health, and eventually, his office. When Tom Johnson lost the election of 1908, he was already a sick and dying man. His fight over the ownership of CEI had left him battered and destitute, his fortune gone to insuring publicly owned factories and utilities. Johnson spent the rest of his days in retirement, but continued to voice his concerns over the public good. He died in 1911, at the age of 56.
When he left office in 1909, Cleveland became a model for what a great city should be like.
During his 8 years in office, Johnson transformed Cleveland from a typical urban pit into a revolutionary model of progressive reform. Johnson gave Cleveland municipal ownership and supervision, a cheap and efficient transportation system, clean streets, and highly effective public servants in the police and fire departments. Many traveled from around the country and around the world to view how a city should be run. In the words of Lincoln Steffens,
It seems to me that Tom Johnson is the best mayor of the best-governed city in the United States.
Johnson's national eminence as mayor of Cleveland dramatically forwarded the cause of the progressive movement. The striking success of Johnson's progressive reforms in Cleveland led to similar municipal revolutions in cities such as New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago. When Johnson died, many prominent men throughout the nation mourned his passing. But perhaps more important than how powerful men remembered him was the way the people of Cleveland, the people he fought for, remembered him, with the fondness and admiration best expressed by the engraving on the statue of Johnson in Cleveland's public square. Beyond his party and beyond his class, this man forsook the few to serve the mass. He found us groping, leaderless and blind. He left us a city with a civic mind. He found us striving, each his selfish part. He left us a city with a civic heart. And ever with his eye set on the goal, the vision of a city with a soul.